Okay, let's go ahead and get started there, folks. Welcome back to another 2 p.m. PST YouTube stream. I'm your host, Strange Bro Jim, and today we are going to be getting back into some Pega studying. We got some videos to continue to upload, and we got some Chrono Trigger after that. So that's the lineup for today's stream. I want to thank everybody for stopping on by yesterday for the birthday stream. Didn't really work out the way I was. Well, actually, I didn't really plan much. So, but things were definitely. I was definitely having some issues. But um, looks like my Steam is finally allowing me to play the games that I have. Not sure exactly what was going on yesterday, but I'm glad that I'm able to actually play them. So, um, okay. So, let's get into what are we doing here on the Pega webpage? Okay, so um, to for a little information on me, if you haven't seen any of my past videos concerning the Pega studying, I tried at one point in time to do the well, actually I was pressured into doing the Pega certification testing at particular point in my time, uh, about 2 years ago or so. Um, it didn't really work out very well. I was not ready for it, and um, the trainer at the time should have known, but he didn't. Um, so yeah, you know, uh, I didn't get a passing score on certification, and therefore I didn't get my certification. Um, they didn't allow for me to retake the class again with a better trainer. Um, and I was pretty much forced into a job without the certification, and the job didn't really help me out either on that. So yeah. Um, Now, one could say, "Hey, Jim, that's your responsibility. You didn't finish off your studies. You didn't, do what you needed to get the job done to get the certification." And I'll agree with you on that one. Um, uh, my main problem is that I find other things to divert my attention at times. So having these streams to kind of keep me focused on the main goal is helpful for me. So, whenever I get assigned a project or an assignment or, work, you know, I don't really have a problem with getting the job done, you know. So, um, I just need something that, I need those goals, those hey, here's what you need to do. This is when you need to do it. Typically, I don't really have a problem with that, but I need that kind of reinforcement along the way, and that's what these streams are all about. Okay, they're helping me focus on the goal of getting the certification, so that's what we're doing. Um, I'm recording it to be uploaded on YouTube later because I want, if I have any kind of problems with the topics, which, um, let's face it, I've had some issues with some of the topics, whether it's their weird commentary on the subject matter at hand, or maybe I'm just not really understanding what they're talking about concerning the topic. You know, I'm hoping that um, veterans or people that have been very um, knowledgeable about Pega can go through those videos, see the questions that I have, and try to answer them because more often than not, I don't get those answers, um, from the topics themselves. And, sometimes I don't even see um, I don't see the correction of said, you know, missing information in later topics. So, they're pretty much left for, you know, what are they saying there? I don't know. It's never answered, kind of situation. And that's really bad because I can make any kind of assumption that I want, based off of that, and that can get me into trouble. So, um, so I encourage anybody that is a veteran or is quite knowledgeable about Pega to help me out in answering whatever questions that I might come upon, um, and uh, help my understanding about the subject of the Pega low code software. Okay, um, that would be fantastic. Now, um, hopefully, by also putting the videos up, then you, the viewer, can also get some benefit out of it. You're also getting some insight that I might have collected over my time programming. Maybe you can, it help, I'm not quite sure exactly how it's helping you out. Feel free to comment, in the comment section or, talk with me directly via chat here on stream. Either one's perfectly fine. Um, you know, um, but let me know what you know, uh, what benefit are you getting out of these videos yourself? That would be fantastic. Would love to hear from you. Now, a couple other points. I am not endorsed in any way by Pega. I'm not getting any kind of benefit for doing these from Pega itself, so don't think that this is some kind of like paid advertisement or something like that. No, it's nothing near, nowhere near that. So, also, I'm not an authorized training partner, and this is not meant to be an instructor-led training. Okay, both of these two should be individuals that know a lot about Pega, should be able to teach you everything about Pega, and should be able to get you to the point of knowing everything that you need to know to pass the certification. Okay. Um, you know, I had an authorized training partner. Well, that wasn't that great. Me and a lot of my teammates that were in the group being trained by the being trained by the authorized training partner, the majority of us went to self-study to try to learn the topics. So um, it was not ideal. Um, and before you say, well, that must have been your own fault, um, we even had, fellow employees of the authorized training partner see the fact that he was being very disingenuous with his teachings. Okay. He gave his peers, his fellow employees, wrong information about what we covered, And when they tested us on the material and asked set questions, we were like, we never covered that. And they were like, oh, okay. So, you know, um, just just one of the things that we had to deal with the gentleman. So, um, you know, that was that one in particular was one of the most egregious. Um, but it wasn't the first and not the last issue that we had with the gentleman. So, um, but I would hope that if you do go for the instructor-led training, it should be someone directly from Pega that knows everything that there is to know about Pega and will help you pass the certifications, thoroughly. Okay. Um, you know, it is expensive to based off, you know, uh, well, it's expensive to me. you know, um, it's like $5,000 or something like that for the system architect. Okay, it's not cheap. Okay, now don't get me wrong. If you get a job, doing Pega development, then you're going to be making that money back. But if you don't have the cash on hand to do said training, then you're going to be in trouble. Okay. Um, so get your money's worth out of that. Okay. If you do go for the instructor-led training, then get your money's worth. Okay. Because, um, you know, you're they're gonna want you know you're gonna want to get as much information out of these guys as you possibly can. Ask as many questions as you can. Try to get as much information as you can about Pega, so that you can pass the certifications. Okay. And don't just say, and don't just ask questions about, the current version, 8.7, 8.8. Ask questions about past keywords and the like. Because when I took my certification for 8.6, there were Pega 7 questions in the certification. Okay. They did not update their certification questions based off of um, the current version. And I say that because, I also recommend that because you're going to be talking with veterans and, individuals that have been working on Pega for, potentially years, um, and their certification might be from that particular um, part of the, of of knowledge. So they might be using keywords that you're not quite familiar with. Okay, and you're gonna need to know, what exactly are they talking about and how to, understand it better. Okay, so do yourself a favor, you know, ask as many questions as you can if you're doing the instructor-led training. Okay, so I'm working towards my system architect. We are currently going over the business architect, the last module there. There's a couple more topics for us to cover, and um, I may try the business architect just to see if I can get it, just so I can, put down on my resume that, hey, I do in fact have my business architect certification. I don't really want it. I'm more inclined on wanting to do more system architect than business architect. But I mean, having a business architect certification could potentially help you out too, because then you have the opportunity of talking more with the business architects about, their level of knowledge, and talking with project owners and see what they want, out of their full-on project. There might not be a business architect officially at your company. Okay, and they might only have enough money to pay for like a single system architect or something along those lines. You never know. Okay, so Um, so, you know, the the information that is provided with the system architect, there's a lot of double up with the business architect. So, I mean, if you can, that'd probably be in your best interest to be able to, get both of the certifications if you can. Okay. If your main focus is system architect, then obviously go straight for system architect. But you know, here, let me show you what I mean here. Okay. So as you can see, the system architect and business architect, these two missions here are the same. They're the same two missions. Okay. The only difference is these two modules for the business architect. These two modules are the only two modules that are not included in the system architect. Okay. So you can go through these two modules and you're pretty much done with the business architect mission. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that you're ready for the business architect certification, but I mean it gives you enough information about what you need to have for the business architect. Okay. There's still more test prep that you're probably going to want to do. Um, so you're probably going to want to do that before you consider doing the certification, but we'll get to that. Okay. Mainly after I get done with the system architect. Okay. We'll get into like certification testing prep. Okay. So we're going to continue with the business architect. We're going to finish that off. We've already finished off one of the modules out of the two. We had, 6 topics here. We went over backlog creation last time, which was what, 2, 3 days ago. Um, yeah, so we're going to be moving on to the next topic, which is the user story readiness. Or let me verify this. From yeah, user story readiness. It's 20 minutes. So there's a lot here. Last time it took me 2 hours to get through it all. But then again, I had little side stories too. Um, so let's get through it. We got a long way to go through this, and um, you know, normally I set this up from 2 to 3 p.m. PST for these Pega sessions. And well, last time I did the 20-minute and one of these 20-minute topics, it lasted 2 hours. So, but again, side side stories. So let's go. A user story describes how a end user uses an application to achieve a specific outcome. It is a human-centric way to document a business requirement in a simple and concise format. A user story represents the small unit of work to be developed within the application. Um, well, it might not necessarily be the smallest, but the primary purpose of user stories as project artifacts is to help the development team keep track within the project backlog of all the features they need to build and implement for the client. User stories describe what is required so that features can be designed to satisfy the product owner's satisfaction and ultimately the end business user. A team creates a user story with the team's collective knowledge and experience. Key features of a user story is human-centric, easy to understand, clearly reflects the business value the client receives, and can be tested. Got this piece of chicken nugget in my teeth. Doesn't want to come out. Um, User story structure. You begin by documenting two important elements in a user story. The elements provide clarity on what must be developed and what criteria must be met to consider the user story complete. The two elements are user story description and acceptance criteria. You also add optional elements to each user story to clarify the details of the requirement with attachments and technical notes. All stories have a size and status to help the user story management. You update these as the user story progresses through its life cycle from the initial form to its completion. Alright. Purpose of the user story description is to summarize the client's business requirements. The user story description ensures you capture who needs the feature or function, what is needed, and why it is needed. It needs to be short, written in business language that is easy to understand and clearly identifies the business value. The typical phrasing of a user story follows a simple sentence format. As a who, inserts a user, I want what, insert what they want to do, so that why, insert the business value. The preparation and discussions behind user stories are extremely important. You can only gain this collective understanding through dialogue. Resist the temptation to translate the collective understanding into complex documentation. Focus on the essence of the user story and supplement the details with attachments. So, you know, focus on these, some questions: who, what, why, and then, uh, if you need to um, work on it in such a way that you want to provide like additional documentation, like, hey, they want a listing of all the customers that have bought said product. So, then you might need like a supplement attachment saying, here's the database that shows, what, um, the customer information and, the products that they've purchased or something along those lines. Whatever. So, it doesn't necessarily need to go, directly into the description. It just needs to be a supplement, something, you know, a side attachment kind of thing. So make sure the user story description is not written in technical terms. This gives your technical team the creativity to use best out-of-the-box features to configure a solution. Well, I mean, yes, but yet at the same time, technical terms works with your technical team. So I mean, that doesn't really matter. The purpose of the user story is that it is understandable by the project owner. Okay, the project owner might not necessarily be part of the technical team. Okay, they won't necessarily know. They'll know more of the um, business requirements. Okay, they might know um, the business language, but they might not know the technical language. So that's why user story description in the business language is necessary. You can do technical terms as attachments later. So in the following example, the description is written in business terms that clearly state the user, the need, and the business value of implementing the user story. You will also see that the description is brief. As a call center supervisor, I would like to see a real-time how many customers have registered for promotions so that I can make adjustments as needed to promotion enrollment scripts and awareness. Give each user story a brief name to summarize the content, such as review promotion results or register a new user. Doing so makes it easier to find user stories in the backlog. If you're saying, project number one, project number two, project number three, no one's going to know what that user story is all about. So you want to have an idea as to what the user stories is referring to. Like this is um, this is for customer promotion. You could say something along those lines, right? So Okay, user story acceptance criteria. The acceptance criteria refine the user story so that developers understand what the application must do, and testers are clear on what needs to be tested. The product owner is required to define the business experience expected from the user story and provide the acceptance criteria. User story acceptance criteria are written in unambiguous terms that are easy for the business and non-technical team members to understand. Acceptance criteria are written in outcome terms, not as technical instructions to the development team. They are deliberately negotiable, allowing the development team room to work with the business to achieve the solution. Acceptance criteria, while negotiable, must also be specific enough to test. In the following example, the acceptance criteria are written as outcomes that are specific and testable. As a premium member, I would like to be automatically enrolled in all eligible promotional offers so that I can take advantage of benefits without having to manually enroll. The story is done when the premium member is enrolled automatically 1 week before the promotion date, the start date. Premium member receives an email they've been enrolled. Account rep for top 10% of premium members is notified. Um, Acceptance criteria can describe the system behavior that should happen and any outcomes that must not happen. For example, the outcome that may not happen is the user may not proceed until all mandatory data has been captured. The sample user story illustrates a statement approach to paraphrasing your acceptance criteria. There are a variety of other styles for documenting acceptance criteria, such as capturing scenario-based criteria. For example, your team may choose to use the given, when, and then approach formatted as follows. Given precondition, example, a premium member is eligible for free offer promotions. When something is done, example, they have selected their preferred offer categories and completed the registration process. Then, expected result, example, the system will automatically add the member to the selected upcoming promotions. Limit your acceptance criteria to 6 to 9 items. Too many items may indicate that the user story is too big or complex. If you have 10 or more criteria, consider breaking your user story into multiple smaller user stories. So if the, basically if your criteria, if your acceptance criteria is like, how old are they? Are they male or female? Are they, where's their address? Where's their, what's their, do they have, a, um, are they a member of the club? Do they have a, um, have they already applied for a loan? Have they, you know, um, has the loan already been accepted? Do they have a, good credit? What's their credit score? Is it higher than this? That kind of thing. So it's, if you have so many different layers upon layers upon layers about, uh, what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, then, well, you get to a point where, um, you know, you're gonna have it's gonna spend a lot of time just trying to go through all that just to handle like one particular user story. That's why they say, break it up. Definition of ready, or DOR. Matter of fact, I'm gonna go ahead and write that down here real quick. Because once again, it might come right back up again, or I might see, um, that be addressed later on. So I'm gonna need to try to remember that. So at the start of the project, your team defines what is meant by definition of ready. The team agrees on the definition ready during the prepare phase to set the baseline for user story quality checks. Each project reaches this agreement with relevant business and technical stakeholders on the team. The development of ready lists criteria you must meet before a user story is ready to build. Once your user story is ready according to the definition of ready, you can mark the story as eligible for sprint planning. Typically, the definition of ready is a checklist of criteria. The criteria define the content that must be present in the story, any review process, or sign-ups that must have taken place, as well as any artifacts that need to be gathered or attached. The following spreadsheet shows a user story with 12 example criteria to meet. Now, this isn't the same as the acceptance criteria, bear in mind, okay? This is when, you know, here's all your user story names, all these user stories that needs to be handled. Have they been completed? Um, what's the um, user stories, you know, um, description, okay? And if all these are completed, then, technically they are, ready to go. You know, they you've completed everything that you needed to complete for this particular project. So, um, a predefined definition ready ensures that all team members are clear on the minimum requirements for a user story. It confirms that any user stories placed into a sprint have undergone a quality check and can be successfully delivered within the sprint. Hey there, Blackheart. How you doing there, bud? Welcome back to the stream. I'm doing pretty good. Back doing some more Pega studying. Hopefully you're having a good day. Um, User story refinement. The purpose of refining a user story is to ensure that your team has complete understanding of the intent and scope. Story refinement is an alternative process that matures the story content to meet the definition of ready. The Pega Express delivery approach promotes direct capture of objectives, or DCO, as you know. Again, remember to, you know, remember that acronym there, direct capture of objectives, to ensure collaboration with all relevant stakeholders. Direct capture of objectives is used throughout the refining process to ensure each user story has all the information included in it from all points of view. User story refinement begins with a draft story that may include little more than a brief description. Refinement ends when you hand the user story to the technical team for sizing. Draft user stories. The business architect, product owner, and other relevant stakeholders discuss the user story so that business objectives and user requirements are clear. Once done, the stakeholders share the user stories with the technical team for further refinement. Why would the stakeholders share the user story? Wouldn't that be more the business architect, sharing the user stories with the technical team? I don't know. That seems a little off, but whatever. The business and technical teams work together. This collaboration includes the product owner, subject matter experts, SMEs. Let me go ahead and mark that one down as a potential, um, acronym to remember. Subject matter experts. UX design specialists, testing specialists, business architects, system architects, and IT specialists. The teams review the user story and clarify the details. User story refinement may take several direct confirmation of objectives. Direct capture of objectives. God damn it. Direct capture of objectives. Why can't I get that damn acronym stuck in my brain yet? Direct capture of objectives. Direct capture of objectives. Direct capture of objectives. Ah. Um, but yeah, user story refinement may take several direct capture of objective sessions before the team is satisfied that the user story has been discussed in detail and documented appropriately. Depending on the nature of the user story, you may need to address artifacts like user story approval emails, UI wireframes, process maps, business rules, decision logic diagrams. As part of the refinement session, technical team interprets the acceptance criteria and translate the outcomes into components that need to be configured within the application. The technical team also identifies any dependencies the story may have on other user stories and impacts the story may have on existing functionality and areas of particular complexity. The technical team may need to take account of non-functional requirements, such as specific user accessibility requirements. These requirements may be lost if not documented within the user story. During refinement, the team documents those details in the user story through additional attachments or specific acceptance criteria. As you refine the user story, you may realize it is too big or complex. In that case, break it into more than one user story. Alternatively, your work during refinement may expose a gap in the requirements and generate the need to add additional user stories to your backlog. Once stories are refined, the refinement process begins when the team agrees that they understand the user story. All, all the additional supporting information is added to the user story, and the product owner approves the acceptance criteria. Once refined, the technical team is in the position to size the user story. The story sizing brings the refinement to an end. Okay, technical stories. As part of the refinement process, the technical team identifies technical tasks to complete that fulfill the acceptance criteria of a user story. Some technical configurations warrant special attention. The team can separate these tasks from the configuration effort to facilitate the allocation of work within Scrum and ensure that reusable components are built with the appropriate acceptance criteria. The Scrum team may decide to create a technical story that includes only technical elements. I mean, technically, you probably should be doing that anyway for all the user stories, but whatever. Typical examples of technical stories include the configuration of interface connectors, test harnesses, a DevOps repository, new environments, other technical elements required to support multiple user stories. During refinement, the technical story is listed as a dependency for any user story that require these generic technical components. Technical stories allow team members to work in parallel to deliver related user stories in the same sprint. The team also separates the effort associated with creating technical assets from that of creating business solutions. Technical stories are subject to the same rules as user stories to the extent that they must meet the definition of ready to be allocated to a sprint. They are sized in the same way non-technical user stories are sized. Story sizing. There are several ways to reflect the size of a story. Story pointing, given points to each story, is an activity conducted at the end of a refinement discussion. The purpose of the activity is to size the story's complexity. The higher the number, the higher the story complexity. The higher the effort to configure, test, and implement the story. The common approach is to use a Fibonacci number sequence. This sequence allows the team to rank stories in terms of relative complexity. The following Fibonacci scale determines story points. 1 point is a very small story, 2 points is a small story, 3 points is a medium story, 5 points is a medium to large, 8 points is a large, 13 is a very large, and 21 plus story points. The story needs to be considered as an epic and broken down into smaller pieces. Um, Estimation with complexity buckets. Achieving a constant evaluation of story complexity can be challenging as each team member may view complexity differently. You can estimate story complexity using complexity buckets to give your team a way to size stories consistently by discussing each story in terms of predefined buckets of complexity before choosing the final points. I would have loved to kind of gotten that from my past job, to understand how they figured out, the point scaling on that. Unfortunately, um, the gentleman that was kind of in charge of that, he moved on into AT&T, um, and it wasn't necessarily his job to teach us about the point system and the individuals that were kind of put in charge of our team afterwards. I don't know if they even knew um, about complexity buckets or whatnot, but that's something that was never really addressed at my last job. Probably should have. They probably should have discussed it more because I mean that's something that any developer should be aware of. You know, what does a manager consider a very small story? What do they consider a medium story? What do they consider a large story? What do they consider a very large story? What's the breakdown? So, and that might be different based off of where you work too. So bear that in mind, okay? What you might consider a medium, they might consider a large, story. So, just be uh, be flexible along that, along those lines, okay? They might view it as a larger complexity. Maybe they don't have very strong veteran programmers. Okay, maybe there are a lot of fairly new um, system architects in their team, and therefore, the complexity might be a little bit larger for them. So, you know, so bear that in mind. Um, okay, during the prepare phase, the team must agree on the criteria most appropriate to evaluate the story's complexity. Each criterion becomes a complexity bucket. Within each bucket, the team must agree on the ranking of complexity from light through medium to high or complex. For example, developers should consider the UI implications of a user story, the amount of testing, configuration, number of business rules, and data integrations as they decide upon their sizing number. For each level of complexity, you assign a point value. Typical complexity buckets may include user interface, business logic, data, integration aspects, and testing. During the sizing session, the team reviews each story against all the criteria and calculates the total story points based on the category's complexity rating. The total value is then matched to the appropriate Fibonacci number, where the numbers are not an exact match and fall between the sequence of the Fibonacci numbers. The team agrees which of the Fibonacci numbers on either side is the total best represents the complexity and assigns that value to the story. So a little bit of a graphic here, estimating story points using complexity buckets. This approach provides a consistent way for teams to cite stories by discussing each story in terms of predefined buckets of complexity before deciding on the final points. The steps are simple. Decide on the buckets of complexity you think match your project. For example, many software development efforts have the buckets used below, but a reporting or EL project could have different ones. Business logic project, okay. Discuss the story in each bucket and determine if the team can agree if the work has a light, medium, high, or complex level of complexity. add up the points and see which Fibonacci story point bucket it falls into. Falls between two buckets, have the team do a gut check and decide on the ones it falls into. So, um, user interface, number of screen finds and fields, screen validation logic, number of scenes, business logic, number of business rules, business rule complexity, data integration, number of data stories, complexity of stored proc, number of tables, testing, user testing complexity, data setup complexity, test automation. So, you know, you have to kind of, you know, does does your project have a user interface? If it doesn't, then it's zero. You don't have to add any kind of points to it. But if there is a user interface, then maybe you need to figure out, is it like a full, user interface? Like you need to add in all the user fields and the like. Is that going to take a short amount of time? Is it going to take a, like a full 8-hour day? Is it going to take, you know, several days? It's going to take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, then it starts getting to the point where it's like, okay, well, we're going to need to look into that a little bit more. You might want to need to break it down. So, that kind of thing. So, um, once the user story is estimated, it is now ready for consideration by the project owner at the next sprint planning session. Play planning poker. Planning poker is a collaborative approach to get agreement from your team members on the size of the story. You start by discussing the story with the team to assess it for complexity. Each team member then provides their estimate of the story points. Team members discuss their different estimates, and the team repeats the process of sizing. When all members agree on the story points, you can allocate the number of points agreed upon to that user story. Now, here's the thing. Be careful with this because, if you have a brand new, like entry level system architect, they might not be, fully aware of, certain complexities. What you might think is really simple might be pretty complex to them. They might not know. They might not know, what could be really easy to make. Okay. Sure, I mean, you'd want them to know as much as you can from Pega Academy, the challenges and so on and so forth, but um, don't make that assumption either, you know. Um, you know, ask them why it's very large and then explain to them why it might not be, that kind of thing, right? So, teach them, you know, um, and maybe they will kind of speak up as to why it might be like a very large. Like, maybe it's something that you might not really know. Or, maybe it's something that you didn't really think of when you were like looking at this. Like you're looking at like, user interface, business logic. You feel like there's no data integration needed kind of thing. So you say, oh, that's NA0. We don't need to worry about that, and we'll have a fairly simple testing. But maybe that entry level um, analyst, you know, architect, they might go, well, wait a minute, you know, we may need to stay, we might need to keep this customer information for a short period of time to, get through the entire process or something along those lines, right? So, you know, or hey, we might need to store this for, if, if we, um, if the project gets to a point where it's like, okay, we were able to, resolve the issue, but now the customer is wanting a receipt of the of the product that they just purchased or something like that, right? Or they want a, a receipt of the work that was done, right? So now you're looking at, needing some data integration, and maybe that analyst was like going, well, they may want this in the future, kind of thing. So we may want to have that data integration, and obviously that might take a little bit of time. So maybe we might need to add 2 points for the data integration, whatever, that kind of thing, right? So don't um, um, it's one of those. It's once again one of those things where it's like, you know, um, be wise enough to listen to everybody's um, thoughts about a project, okay, um, and discuss it. You know, the whole sizing session should be open, okay, and if you're a brand new entry level system architect going through this sizing session, ask questions. You know, um, this sizing session didn't happen in my last job, and that's why I'm kind of sad about that, because I feel that that probably would have been fantastic to to get a little bit of an insight on, um, because my boss at the time and the system and the business architect at the time were kind of talking about user stories and how many points we would probably need to complete it. And now maybe they're referring to something else entirely. Maybe they're talking about specific company points or something along those lines. I don't know. Again, I don't I'm not sure. Okay, it could have been some arbitrary point system that they created, and that was it. The person probably could have been coming up with numbers off the top of their head. You know, I don't know. Okay, or they probably could have been using this whole complexity buckets in their mind, um, thinking out, what how complex it could be, thinking, here's the user interface, here's the business logic, here's the data integration, here's the testing. Um, I'm thinking, 1, 1, 1, 1. It's going to be a really light project. We're probably going to be seeing a medium, you know, out of it all or something. I don't know, you know, not sure. So, um, what good looks like. One of the most common questions in an agile project is, what does a good user story look like? There is no one size fits all model of a user story. A model is different for every team. A range of experiences and industry backgrounds influence the collective requirements of the user story. The following example reflects what a good story would look like once fully elaborated, refined with a technical team, reviewed against the definition of done, and declared ready to build. In the example, look for the following elements: story name, description, acceptance criteria, story size, story status, and additional information. You know, so and, definition, acceptance criterias, additional notes, additional attachments, technical details, the size, the status, the release, all that kind of jazz. So, um, you know, whether or not they actually have like a sheet along this lines, I don't really know. I personally didn't really see No, I mean, they still had some, um, they still had like a sheet that, they put down the user stories in, um, but I don't really remember them really going, they had a description, but I don't think they really put down like an acceptance criteria, and I don't think they really put down the technical details on it either. So, at least I don't really remember. Um, at my last job, if they did, then oh well, you know, um, it wasn't drilled down in my mind. Um, I didn't work on that many projects. Um, we were pretty much cleaning up, you know, past work. So, okay, your user stories improve as your team matures together, which may mean less documentation is required. Um, yeah, but don't do that. You know, don't don't lessen your documentation based off of how good your team is. Okay, because um, your documentation, may need to be used by another team months from now. Okay, so don't lessen your documentation for that. Okay, if you're trying to use something very complex and like for one of your user stories, and you don't document, the purpose of making it super complex, then, the team down the road may look at it and go, why did they do this? You know, Now, obviously, they might figure it out eventually as to why, but I mean, if you have the documentation there, that goes away. Okay, their questions are answered. So, don't lessen your documentation based off of how good you are. That makes no sense whatsoever. Don't do that. Oh well. Alternatively, lessons learned from issues you discover in a sprint can be incorporated into your team's process to help create better user stories. True. Be flexible and ready to adopt updates to your user stories to ensure that they meet their primary purpose to help the development team implement application that satisfies the product owner and ultimately the end business user. Okay, so we have our question here. Who's responsible for defining the definition ready? Um, um, I think it's just the product owner. Oh, all answers are correct. Okay. Mm, all right. Let's see. Um, They didn't really state that outright. I mean, they say the team agrees on the DOR, but who their team can be kind of different from time to time, it feels like. Who's responsible to finding the definition ready? What consists of your team? I'm gonna make a suggestion about that. In the sentence, what consists of your team? In the question, it shows that all should be considered, but it wasn't clearly defined as to whom is on your team. If you are in a technical team, then a project owner might not technically be in your team. As you have managers that will discuss projects with the project owner. Um, um, like for an example, take football. Is your team the full team? Um, say the Cowboys? Or is it the defense? The offense? The kicking team? Need to be a little clearer. On is on a team. All right. So, okay, we are all done with that. So, we covered user story. Um, Readiness on that. Now we're going to be going into directly capture objectives, which I need, I'll be repeating quite a bit. So that might help me on remembering that DCO is directly capture objectives. We'll see. Um, but but we'll cover that tomorrow. Then we'll do the plan validation next day and the module quiz on that day as well. Because I would imagine that directly capture objectives being 15 minutes is going to take the majority of tomorrow. Plan and validation and module quiz will be the next day after that. And then most likely, I'll probably need to do, I'll probably need to wrap up, the module on that day with the module quiz. And then the day after that, we'll go over the mission test for the business architect. Okay. Now, um, I'm going to run it once with the feedback enabled. Okay. Just to, pass the test. And then I'll run it again without the feedback because, I want to kind of show the fact that, like, if I miss a question, how much would I be prepared at this particular moment in time to take the business architect mission and certification? Okay. You know, what areas would I need to cover more? What areas do I need assistance more? What do I need, you know, to focus on? Okay, because when it comes to the certification itself, um, there's going to be a lot of, you know, there's going to be a lot of topics that it's going to be covering, and you know, they will tell you at the very end of the exam how much, like, well, they won't tell you like how many questions were there, but they will tell you like, hey, um, you got like 70% out of the 100% necessary for the case management, for example. Okay, so um, and obviously, 70% for case management, would be pretty good. You know, if you consider just case management as, as like the whole test, then 70% will give you that passing score, right? But obviously you're gonna want to try to aim for that 100% if you can. Know the material, know how to get the material, how to figure out the material. What are they talking about when they are talking about, case lifecycle, stages, set case statuses, add instructions to tasks, all that kind of jazz. You're gonna need to know it, you know, because, the certification exam may ask those questions. Now, um, you know, are you gonna need to know everything? Are you gonna need to be 100% when you reach your job? No, I don't. At least no one should be expecting that. Um, but I mean, they're just the company's going to be looking for your certification. Okay, if you have that certification, that means that you've been able to learn the material and pass the necessary exam questions to you know you understand enough to work at the job. Okay, right now I don't have that certification, so I can't necessarily prove that. You know, yeah, I was at a job before, but you know, does that actually prove that I've been able to understand the material? Do a good job on the job? They're not going to necessarily know per se. I mean, they could try to take my word for it. They might call up my past employer and say, how did he do in his, contractor job? But they might not, be fully on board on that. Okay, they're going to want that certification. So, to be, 100% sure that you could, technically do the work. Okay. Um, you know, uh, that's what certifications are all about. That's what licenses are all about. That's what bachelor's degrees are all about. Masters, PhDs, um, um, boot camps, whatever. Okay, every single little you know type of you know uh, honorary title you can get just kind of goes to show the employer, the prospective employer, that hey, you can learn, you can do the work that is necessary to do what they need. Okay. Now I can tell them, I can tell the job interviewer, hey, you know, uh, one of my past jobs, they wanted me to learn cold fusion day one. Okay. They wanted me to work with a particular client. They needed me to learn a particular language by a certain point of time, and then they put me on the job itself. They wanted me to kind of learn, or they wanted me to learn the material, and then they wanted me to apply said material to their client. Okay. If I wasn't learning fast enough on that particular material, then what would have happened if I got to the client and I started messing up? I started making mistakes. Okay, that makes the business look bad. That makes the client look angry, and the client may just say, "You guys are doing you guys did a terrible job at this. We're going to go to some other business." Okay, so you know that that you know that certification tends to kind of point to like, hey, you did that. You accomplished that. You're able to learn. Okay. Now, I don't have that, hey, I learned cold fusion on the job, but I don't have anything to necessarily prove that. Okay. That's just my word that I learned cold fusion at another job. Okay. Now I could say, hey, I got a bachelor's degree. I know how to go about doing that. I know how to learn a new language, learn, how to, you know, look at the code, learn how to figure out, what is necessary for the code to, build what is necessary. Okay. Um, I could say something along those lines. Okay. But so can every other bachelor degree that's out there. Now, if there was like a certification training for cold fusion, which there wasn't, or at least not to my knowledge there wasn't, um, then it probably would have been fantastic if I had gotten said certification and said, hey, I was able to learn cold fusion along with my bachelor's degree. So now, you know, when you have, someone with just a bachelor's degree and someone with a bachelor's degree and a cold fusion certification, for example, who would you pick, right? So that's my point. Okay, it gives a little bit more of an advantage to you to have said certifications and the like. It's pretty much a given, right? So so don't be afraid to try to get yourself those certifications. Okay, work towards those certifications because they will be helpful in getting that um, and you getting that job. You know, so um, you know, letters of recommendation could also be useful as well. They didn't really get any when I was on the job, but even though I had a couple of people say, "Hey, well, I'll provide you a letter of recommendation," and crickets afterwards. It's like, God damn it. Oh well. All right, but that's gonna be it for the Pega session. We're gonna go ahead and switch on over to um, the video uploads, editing, and so on and so forth for the YouTube channel. So I want to thank everybody for stopping by and chatting with me, Blackheart. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Um, for anybody that was just kind of lurking in the background, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Um, no worries if you didn't want to chat. No problem on that. Don't stress. You're good. Uh, hopefully you got some decent insight on this particular topic. Um, like I said, if you have any kind of questions or anything like that, feel free to give them in the chat right now with while I'm streaming, or feel free to put that in the comments. Okay, you're welcome to. Okay, I might not necessarily be able to answer it. Bear in mind, I'm not a foremost expert, but one, I can see about trying to find someone to answer it if I don't have the answer. I know some people that have worked in the Pega industry for a while, so I can always ask them. Two, your question might be someone else's question as well. Okay, so don't be afraid to ask questions. Okay, that it helps your understanding out, and it may help someone else's understanding of the topic out in the future as well. Okay, so please don't be afraid to ask questions. Okay, questions are key to understanding. So, and that goes for pretty much anything. You know, um, you know, I often attribute it to, um, and think of it this way. Okay, a young child, like just just started, walking, speaking, talking. Okay, one of the main questions that they typically like to ask when they are, brand new to the world, they like to ask why. Okay, what is this doing? How does this work? Why does this work? And all that kind of jazz. They're trying to learn. Okay, you know, why is the sky blue? They don't know. They're trying to learn that. You know, so if you give them that information, give them the answers, definitive, clear, correct answers, they're going to take that and they're going to build off of that. Okay. So, whenever you see a child say, why, Why? They're learning. Okay. So, um, so help them with that. Okay. Help yourself with that. You know, there's nothing wrong with saying why. Okay. You're trying to learn something. Help yourself. Okay. So that's where we're gonna end it. Check out the description for social media links and the like. Um, and yeah, we're gonna continue this again tomorrow. So hopefully I'll see you all there. Stop recording.